In the harsh winter of 1841, a deeply unsettling figure began to appear on the frozen streets of Philadelphia's Kensington neighborhood. As dawn broke, residents would see a young girl, no older than 8, walking barefoot through the snow, her feet leaving bloody trails that formed strange, intricate patterns. She would stand for hours, completely still, outside the Pennsylvania hospital, her gaze fixed on the imposing brick building with an eerie, ancient wisdom in her eyes. Witnesses reported that her lips would sometimes move silently, as if she were reciting something from memory. When concerned citizens approached her, she responded not as a child, but with the precise, chilling language of a medical professional. She described complex surgical techniques and anatomical details with a clinical accuracy that horrified and bewildered the adults who heard her. Over that winter, 37 separate official reports were filed about this mysterious child. These documents, unearthed from the Philadelphia Municipal Archives over a century later in 1943, revealed a curious and telling notation: medical discretion advised. No formal investigation was ever initiated. The full truth about Sarah Montgomery and her connection to Philadelphia's leading medical institution was deliberately concealed behind classified documents and locked doors. The medical community of the 1840s was determined to ensure that stories like hers remained buried. In 1841, Philadelphia was the undisputed center of American medical science. The Pennsylvania Hospital, founded by Benjamin Franklin, attracted brilliant physicians from around the world. The city had more medical schools per capita than any other in the nation, and its doctors produced a vast amount of research. However, this progress was built on a dark foundation. The concepts of ethical oversight, patient consent, and government regulation were non-existent. This environment gave ambitious doctors like Dr. Cornelius Thorne near-total freedom to experiment, particularly on vulnerable populations who lacked the power to object. The Kensington district, where Sarah was first seen, was home to a desperate influx of Irish immigrants. These families, fleeing poverty and famine, lived in squalid, overcrowded tenements where disease was rampant and life expectancy was shockingly low. It was from this marginalized, voiceless community that certain physicians sourced their human test subjects for procedures that would never be risked on wealthy, connected patients. Dr. Thorne was a celebrated physician who specialized in treating hysteria and melancholia. His wealthy clients paid enormous fees for his innovative treatments involving mercury, opium, and electrical stimulation. His international reputation was built on research that required extensive access to young test subjects, access he could not have obtained through his legitimate practice. Sarah's parents, Bridget and Seamus Montgomery, were typical of Kensington's residents. They had recently immigrated from Ireland and struggled with poverty and illness. Seamus worked in a textile mill and developed a severe lung disease, plunging the family into medical debt. Their landlord, Mrs. Agnes Kellerman, a Prussian immigrant with her own suspicions of authority, kept meticulous records of her tenants. As the brutal winter worsened and their debts mounted, the Montgomerys were presented with an impossible choice: sign over guardianship of their daughter to a charitable institution in exchange for erasing their debts and continuing Seamus's medical care. Desperate, they signed papers they couldn't read. On January 15, 1841, Sarah vanished from her room. The only thing left behind was an officious note stating she was in proper medical care and that all debts were settled. The note bore the seal of a Philadelphia medical society that did not, in fact, exist. When her parents tried to find her, they hit a wall of denial from every hospital, orphanage, and city office. They were told that a child placed in medical care by parental consent was not considered missing. The reality was far more sinister. Dr. Thorne and a secret group of colleagues operated a clandestine organization called the Society for the Advancement of Neurological Science. This group systematically identified vulnerable immigrant children and acquired them through deceptive contracts. These children were then taken to a hidden facility in a converted warehouse near the port, where they became unwilling subjects in brutal experiments. The goal was to test the limits of psychological manipulation and pharmaceutical intervention on the developing mind. Children were subjected to controlled trauma, high doses of mercury and opium, and conditioning designed to break their will and enhance their ability to absorb information under extreme duress. Sarah, designated as Subject S41, proved to be an exceptionally successful subject. Thorne's notes describe her remarkable memory and rapid learning. Over months of experimentation, her personality was systematically erased and rebuilt. She learned complex medical terminology and procedures, and developed a terrifying condition Thorne called adaptive dissociation. She could shift between a state of clinical, detached precision, observing and even assisting in procedures performed on herself and others, and an artificial, performative childlike state. Meanwhile, strange occurrences were reported around the medical district, children's voices reciting anatomy from hospital basements, surgical instruments arranged like toys, and sightings of a small, knowing girl correcting medical professors during lectures. Mrs. Kellerman, armed with her detailed records and her own experience with Prussian medical abuses, joined forces with Rebecca Stanwood, a Quaker child welfare advocate. Together, they began to document a pattern of disappearances among immigrant children, all following the same script of offers for medical care and education, followed by official-looking paperwork and then complete denial from authorities. Inside the warehouse, the experiments grew more extreme. The facility now held nearly 20 children. The routined education with experimentation, conditioning the children to see their abuse as normal and even beneficial. Sarah's transformation was the most profound. She became an unwilling collaborator, using her childlike appearance to comfort other victims while simultaneously assisting Thorne and coldly recording data on their suffering. The breaking point came in July 1841 when a 6-year-old boy, Stanislaw Kowalik, died from a deliberate mercury overdose in a threshold test. Dr. Edmund Hartwell, Thorne's partner, was horrified by this calculated killing and began secretly documenting the facility's operations to gather evidence. He learned of an upcoming city health inspection of the warehouse district and devised a plan to coordinate with Mrs. Kellerman and Ms. Stanwood to expose the operation during the inspection. Fearing discovery, Thorne decided to destroy all evidence. He prepared lethal injections to kill all the children, planning to blame their deaths on a cholera outbreak. As he prepared the doses, Sarah, whose conditioned mind understood exactly what he was doing, confronted him. In a chilling monologue delivered with clinical detachment, she used the medical knowledge he had forced into her brain to deconstruct his plan, explaining precisely how investigators would uncover the truth. She even offered him alternative, more effective methods for covering up the murders, analyzing the situation as a purely intellectual exercise. At that moment, the authorities, guided by Hartwell, Kellerman, and Stanwood, stormed the facility. They discovered a scene of profound horror, traumatized children displaying widely varying degrees of psychological damage, and Sarah Montgomery, an 8-year-old girl who calmly explained the investigative process to the other children in the language of a seasoned physician before suddenly breaking down into tears for her mother. Thorne avoided justice by committing suicide in his office shortly thereafter. His final note described Sarah as both his greatest success and his most tragic failure. The official investigation that followed was widely considered a cover-up. Only 11 children were officially acknowledged, though witnesses reported more. Most were eventually returned to their families, but all bore lasting scars. Sarah's case was the most complex. She was reunited with her parents, but the child they knew was gone, replaced by a person with a doctor's knowledge trapped in a child's emotional world. She lived into adulthood, never marrying, and served as a consultant to physicians on unusual psychological cases, her own mind a permanent record of the horrors she had endured. The scandal sent shockwaves through Philadelphia and led to early calls for medical ethics reform, though change was slow. The warehouse was torn down and the site now lies buried under a parking lot, a silent testament to a dark chapter in the pursuit of scientific knowledge at any cost. Sarah Montgomery's story remains a powerful warning about the ethical boundaries of science and the vulnerability of the powerless.